Yeah, I think personal branding is quite an important topic, and particularly senior executives who might have spent many years with the same organization step out and find themselves without, an external network oftentimes and without any, clear idea of how to go about personal branding. And, we know that's in essence very important because it replaces almost the credibility of the former, big job title and the organization that you were part of.
Welcome to the Flex Executive Code. I have a special guest, great friend, as well as a professional that I admire completely. Nancy has been a colleague and as well as a friend for many years. Now she sits on the advisory council of Board Matchup. Nancy also has been CHRO for multiple large companies, includes Jet Aviation, Element Technologies, and earlier with GE as well as Airbus. So multiple different organizations lived and worked across the world and did multiple different M&A as well as transformation roles. She's a doctorate in psychology and therefore has great insights in the organizational behavior and psychology field. So therefore, I have a lot of respect for what Nancy brings to the table. So very important topic today. Topic is about executive transitions. We'll be discussing what people go through, how can they cope with that. We'll also talk about how organizations can get ready with this, what they can prepare. And of course, the favorite topic for us being HR professionals is what can HR professionals do to get ready for the flex executive economy. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Karonesh. It's a pleasure to be here.
I've been looking forward to this conversation and talking about executive transitions. So many executives today are planning their new chapter very differently, and we are seeing that around us. Some are coming from reasons which are very different, coming from their own motivation, coming from what we are seeing in the organization. But I would love to hear about your take on what you're hearing from the people you have been talking to.
Sure, Karonesh. I'm really seeing a clear redefinition of what executives or C-suite executives mid to level career success really looks like nowadays. I think there are several key trends that we can take a look at. First, obviously, a clear rise in former top executives moving out of full-time roles into portfolio careers. So many executives I've spoken to and that I also coach as part of transitioning really are embracing, this idea of plural roles. So they're moving away from full-time C-suite in an organization and they want to go into more flexibility, board membership, advisory gigs, the whole concept around fractional roles, interim positions. And of course, several of them also move into entrepreneurship roles, becoming founders themselves. Second trend I see really comes from, I would say, organizations themselves. There is quite a strong demand for executives who are agile and highly specialized. So many organizations, particularly when you look at startups and also private equity firms, intentionally are seeking, very specific niche expertise on a flexible basis rather than putting, high-level C-suite executives on their payroll. Gives them more flexibility and, typically they pull them in for projects on a needs basis. And another trend I've observed is digital and global fluidity. Mobile, remote work. Since the pandemic, everybody is able to do that, and with that comes almost like an ease of global and also digital collaboration. And that has unlocked, new positions and opportunities for executives in any market across the world, independent of where they're physically located. And I think that's quite exciting for several former C-suite and top executives.
This is so nice. I mean, you touched upon all the three, which is what's happening to the executives, also how the demand from PE firms or startups or VCs are coming up. And then the third one, of course, is the digital thing. So it's literally an ecosystem building up here from
Yeah.
all the three sides, actually looking at something or the other very different. And that's very interesting. And I think you are absolutely right that since all this is coming together, certainly there is also much bigger play here. And for the organizations and their readiness, of course, there are multiple types of organizations. Are you seeing some of the specific type of organizations being more open about the idea of embracing this compared to the others? Is there some trend you see there also?
I think companies most open to this type of project based or fractional executive use are definitely startups, and I would say companies in transition. Companies that are scaling up oftentimes make use of very seasoned executives who have stepped out because they don't need to put them on the payroll. They pull them in for specific transition projects and remain ultimately very flexible in their use of that expertise. Of course, also private equity firms like interim or fractional C-suite execs for, their portfolio companies. They pull them in for special projects, particularly around M&A oftentimes. And then larger corporations, typically for transformation projects. They need change agents who, have done it and seen it, know how to approach it, and really take people with them as part of that transformation. And again, they don't need to put them on full-time overhead.
Yeah.
And then the last category, I would say, also I've seen quite a lot of nonprofits and social enterprises pulling in executives because it's more affordable for them, rather than putting them again on payroll. They have that flexibility of helping, having that help from executives to, develop their strategies.
So true. I keep saying that this is like almost like the future of talent management in a way, that we'll see more people adapting that path, but also for organizations to start becoming more ready, because agile is the word today. I mean, people want that flexibility, people want that ability to attract folks. Changing this topic a little bit, moving towards people who are going through that transition. And I think Nancy and I know that after so many different big roles, you also decided to kind of change your focus and kind of spend time the way you wanted to spend that time instead. And I know that last several years, the way you have been traveling and remained busy, that it can take a toll on the executives of this world today. Tell me about what you are seeing in terms of people who are transitioning. Of course, everybody has a different reason for doing that. But also at that stage, they look for clarity, support. They want to kind of decide that, okay, tell me what are the options. And I can see that there's so many options. You mentioned just now could be a board, advisory, fractional, interim, entrepreneurship. That must be also quite confusing for people. But normally, when we look at senior executives, we think that they've got everything sorted, they've got everything clear in their head. But of course, everybody has a different experience. I know many of them come to you for advice. And of course, you have gone through your own journey. Tell me a little bit about what kind of clarity they're looking for, what support typically they would need.
I think a lot of executives, when they step out, have some mental hurdles they have to overcome in terms of, who am I really without my job title? So it's almost like a little bit of a loss of identity. A lot of executives come and have questions like, is this all there is? What have I really achieved when I reflect back? And, just like me and you, we used to define ourselves through our work, and this stepping out of full-time positions really can lead to almost like a little bit of a midlife crisis. For many years the job title and the company were very important to your self-worth. You defined yourself through that position, and the key question really that you have to ask yourself is, who am I really without my organization, my title, and my very important job, of course. So what I do is, I work quite a lot with executives to help them overcome that, to really look at reflecting what is important to me. How do I define the next chapter of my life without my job title, without that role? And it's almost like a reframing of kind of the story that you tell yourself in terms of what's next. So you're not losing your identity or your position, but you're really transitioning. And transitioning is really the key word here. And we try to make that exciting and new for the executive. So it helps for them to, take some time to reflect, to look inward, to speak to peers, to speak to other executives who have transitioned. And of course, they can also come to us for transition coaching. But I think it's really a time where you have to just spend time sitting with it and understanding what could be next. And that piece for several executives is not as easy as one would think.
Yeah, yeah. And as you were talking just now, Nancy, I was reflecting on my own journey also. Honestly, I never thought that, having done the corporate roles the way I've done, I could ever get into entrepreneurship. That's not something that I visualized ever. But this is also, in a way, an opportunity for people to rethink and reset themselves, and sometimes you kind of start to discover very different aspect of your own personality which you never thought you had. And I think for me personally, while my corporate life was very solid foundation, I almost kind of rediscovered myself in my entrepreneurship journey. So I think it's a great opportunity for people to kind of look at that also positively, to be able to kind of start something entirely new, and maybe it turns out very differently than what they initially thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I also, find that while we talked about the people and their transition, the readiness of that depends a lot on what have they done over the last few years, how they have kind of created their own network, how they have leveraged their network, what kind of experiences they have built, and also what kind of personal branding they have built. Do you see people coming to you with that awareness and talking about it in some way or the other?
Yeah, I think personal branding is quite an important topic, and particularly senior executives who might have spent many years with the same organization step out and find themselves without, an external network oftentimes and without any, clear idea of how to go about personal branding. And, we know that's in essence very important because it replaces almost the credibility of the former, big job title and the organization that you were part of. So, we've tried to support executives in really looking at personal branding from a quite strategic perspective, working on LinkedIn presence, because ultimately that becomes your business card. It's how you present yourself to the world of work going forward. I think also a lot of senior executives don't think about the importance of building thought leadership. So really, looking at what type of content can I publish to show my specific expertise I've built over many years in an organization, because ultimately that will help build trust and of course attract, their first opportunities if they're interested in moving into, flex exec. And then I think also back to self-reflection. The key in personal branding is being very clear on the narrative in terms of what is actually my value proposition. How do I articulate my value proposition? And it's, I think, very important for organizations who want to pull flex execs in, that they understand what that particular individual actually offers and why they're different than other executives that are on the market. So really defining, the why, also what they actually will offer and how they will go about it is quite crucial.
So true. And I'm again saying that when I look around people who have been able to make a difference or have been able to come out of that phase faster, I can see that they've worked very consciously on their branding.
Yeah.
So certainly it helps a lot. And let me go back to our other hat, which is the HR. And Nancy, I've always seen you as a very forward looking HR professional. You have always been ahead of your time. I've seen you in action, not only as colleagues at GE, but also subsequently in your CHRO roles in very different industries. You have always been ahead of time in terms of setting new standards, doing work differently. Your focus on talent has always been very big. And I know a lot of HR professionals will look at you saying that, okay, tell me, what do I do now that you're talking about flex executive economy? How do I prepare myself? As an HR professional, what can I do? Tell me some of the guidance that you may have for the HR fraternity. What can they do differently to be able to get ready for this?
I think in order to get ready to take on more flex executives, it's important to redefine how the organization pulls in talent. What happens with the flex exec economy is that it really almost flattens hierarchies, and it also gives more access to leadership to different or diverse people. Senior executives who are open to coming into an organization will probably have a less linear career path. They don't come in with a one directional career ladder, but they've done multiple positions across sectors, across industries. So they offer a very unique expertise. I think from an HR side, it's very important to have very quick onboarding and making sure that an executive who steps in quickly understands the culture, the context, the values, and how the organization really ticks in order to be successful. Because most likely they will only stay, 6 or 9 months for a transformation, for a transition, M&A integration support. So the critical piece is really quick onboarding so they can step in and make an impact fast.
That's so true. And some organizations are able to accept that much faster. They don't have to work on this aspect. And also culturally, these people who come in, they don't come with the same kind of expectations what they would have had in their full-time roles. I mean, I keep joking about this, that these are the people who don't need a corner office anymore. They are quite comfortable with the people. They interact with coaching people, guidance, and still be happy about doing that. So very different path. I'm again going back to this whole talent ecosystem that we are talking about. So, if I'm a transitioning executive, what all should I look for in terms of getting ready for my next thing? Any thoughts on that, Nancy?
I think oftentimes executives need time to reflect to really make that transition successfully. Reflection should include looking at, your financial situation, your personal, your health situation, and also your emotional state of mind, and really taking time to think about what will it take, how do I actually define success in that new position. Again, you will no longer have a fancy job title and a secure income. But on the other side, you may gain quite a lot of deep purpose and the sense of really having an impact when you step in for a short project and really, make a difference for an organization. And it also comes with a lot of autonomy, which a lot of executives don't have in full time positions. And for me, most importantly, control over your time, which to me is priceless. Executives who are transitioning also need to make sure that they rebuild their story in terms of success, because again, this loss of identity is something that quite a lot of them struggle with. And oftentimes, that kind of career story is what's keeping them from stepping into flex roles because they feel that it's just difficult to define what their career looks like going forward. So, really, again, personal branding, being clear on what expertise is on offer, building credibility, and really being very clear on that value proposition to me is quite critical. I think important is to really give yourself permission to explore this field without guilt or fear. Feeling insecure is absolutely part of the game. Everyone experiences that level of insecurity. I think also important is to make sure that you're very intentional in the positions that you look for or portfolio positions you look for. Make sure that whatever you take on aligns with your purpose. Look at your personal values, your expertise, and your strengths that you will bring to that particular engagement. Staying visible is also very important. Be active in your networks on LinkedIn, go to conferences, events, create content that's relevant. Also, think about what long term value you bring to the table. It's the reality that not every project from the get go will pay well. Some are just there to open doors, and you will then make changes and that will impact your trajectory going forward for the next engagement. And then, most of all, I think, is stay curious and quite humble, because it is not easy to step into a portfolio career, but it's quite exciting when you reinvent your story, your career. It will require some learning as well as unlearning if you come from large organizations, personal branding or rebranding, and quite a lot of self reflection.
So, Nancy, great points, multiple different insights for people to consider. In your sentence, you use the word rebuild your story. I think that's my biggest takeaway of this conversation today. We need to think about rebuilding that story for the person, and you really the financial situation and considerations around that, along with the emotional and other things, it's extremely important indeed. And I can literally visualize that it's an opportunity for people to rebuild their story, and there's no one size fits all. So one can never say that because it worked for A, it will also work for B and C. So each person has a very different personalized approach that they need to take, and therefore work on that. Nancy, thank you so much for the time today. It's a really great conversation, and you really highlighted some of the areas which are extremely important. And some of the words that you said are really kind of words of wisdom for people to consider, and for us also to think about how do we support some of these transitioning executives in their journey. So thank you very much for spending your time.
Thank you, Karonesh. Take care.